humans not only survive, they thrive when they have purpose and when they know they're not alone and they're part of something bigger. So that's exactly what we've described today. And so the takeaway for me is you're not alone. I'm not alone. And I don't know about you, but that does more than keep me going. It provides energy, and I think that's one of the greatest things that the charter has done is to help us see ourselves, and I mean right here, right now, as part of something bigger globally, and how we can actually access that and connect.
You're tuned in to Compassionate Las Vegas, the podcast, where compassion inspires action. Together, we're building a world centered in understanding, empathy, and courageous action, starting right here in the heart of Southern Nevada. We're taking the principle of do unto others as you would have them do unto you to heart. Now, let's welcome a man committed to fostering compassion in every corner of our city, a beacon of compassion in Las Vegas, your host, Will Rucker.
Welcome to Compassionate Las Vegas, the podcast. I'm Will Rucker, and I am so excited for this program. Today, we are joined by two amazing guests who are going to share what's happening in compassion, not just here in Las Vegas, but what's happening in compassion around the country and around the globe. This is a conversation on compassionate responses to systemic violence. This is such a relevant topic for the world today, so stay tuned. You are absolutely going to enjoy this program, and my hope is that you leave feeling inspired and empowered to make a difference in the world today. Thanks for tuning in and enjoy the podcast.
My name is Geneva Blackmer. I am the interim director for the Interfaith Center at Miami University. We're a 501c3 nonprofit organization that seeks to unify people through relationship building, dialogue, and social action. And I'm very happy to welcome all of you to this panel discussion on compassionate responses to systemic violence. This program is co-sponsored by the Interfaith Council of Southern Nevada, which aims to promote mutual understanding, respect, appreciation, and cooperation among people of various faith and cultural communities in Southern Nevada and in the world as a whole by appreciating the sacred, extending hospitality, offering educational opportunities, encouraging wise leadership, sharing in service, and working for a fair society. Our second co-sponsor is Compassionate Las Vegas, a grassroots organization whose mission is to foster the Charter for Compassion and the movement of compassion in the Las Vegas, Nevada area. And we have three amazing presenters here today. Each one will offer a 10 to 15 minute presentation on their work building compassionate cities and communities. And then we're going to open it up for a Q&A. So we're going to begin by inviting our first speaker, Felipe, who has been bringing awareness to the Golden Rule and empathy with his energetic millennial, Latinx, immigrant, and queer voice and experiences to the compassionate movement for over 5 years, joining the Charter for Compassion in 2021 to amplify its reach with his social marketing and project coordination skills. He is also the chair of the URI North American Leadership Council. So, Felipe, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Geneva, and hello, everyone. As Geneva said, my name is Felipe, and I work for the Charter for Compassion. I am originally from Chile, but I reside in Salt Lake City, Utah. And I'm super excited to be able to talk to you a little bit about compassion, systemic violence, the Charter for Compassion, and the work that we do at Compassionate Cities, sort of like our response to systemic violence that we see. So first of all, if you want to raise your hand or just make one of the reactions on Zoom, have you ever heard of the Charter for Compassion? And if you have, the Charter for Compassion is an organization that began on 2009 by, it all started with Karen Armstrong, an interfaith theologian who gave a TED talk about the Golden Rule. The Golden Rule, treat others as you want to be treated. The principle that we can find in almost every religious text, in almost every civilization throughout time as a basic principle of humanity. I tend to always ask people when I talk about the golden rule, what would the world would look like if all of us just remembered the golden rule at the beginning of our days? I feel like all of us have learned from the golden rule either through church or family or school. The most secular way, the one is like treat others as you want to be treated. But then you can go into the Bible or the Quran or all these different religious texts, and you can find different versions of it. So Karen Armstrong presented the idea of the Charter for Compassion, where she can create this letter, this charter for the world to read, to follow, and to hopefully be able to be inspired through the golden rule to do good on this planet. So the Charter for Compassion now is an organization that is sort of like a network of networks. We try to bring together different organizations throughout the world that do work in response to compassion. So to define compassion, let's put yourself in a scenario. You're walking down the street and you see a person and you see that that person is in pain. But you realizing that that person is in pain, that process is sympathy. Oh, that person is in pain. You walk down the street, you see the person in pain, you recognize that they're in pain, so sympathy, but then you feel the pain that that person is feeling. That is empathy. So, you're feeling that pain with them. You walk down the street, you recognize that the person is in pain, you feel their pain, so you do sympathy, empathy, but then you have a desire to end their pain. Even if it's not your pain, it could be someone experiencing homelessness, it could be someone that is hungry and you're not at the moment, but you have the desire to eliminate that pain. That to us in the Charter for Compassion, that is the definition of compassion. So we try to take action to eliminate the pain of others. Now, if we look around and talk about systemic, well, first of all, I guess maybe one of the things I wanted to share with you, and I'm going to share my screen, is a little video definition of what the Charter for Compassion is. And in fact, this video basically is reading the whole charter, the whole letter that was written through all these theologians and religious leaders around the world. So let me play this.
The principle of compassion lies at the heart of all religious, ethical, and spiritual traditions,
calling us always to treat all others as we wish to be treated ourselves.
Compassion impels us to work tirelessly to alleviate the suffering of our fellow creatures,
to dethrone ourselves from the center of our world and put another there,
to honor the inviolable sanctity of every single human being,
treating everybody without exception,
with absolute justice, equity, and respect.
It is also necessary in both public and private life
to refrain consistently and empathically from inflicting pain,
to act or speak violently out of spite, chauvinism, or self-interest,
to impoverish, exploit, or deny basic rights to anybody,
and to incite hatred by denigrating others, even our enemies,
is a denial of our common humanity.
We acknowledge that we have failed to live compassionately,
and that some have even increased the sum of human misery in the name of religion.
We therefore call upon all men and women to restore compassion
to the center of morality and religion,
to return to the ancient principle
that any interpretation of Scripture
that breeds violence,
hatred,
or disdain
is illegitimate.
To ensure that youth are given accurate and respectful information
about other traditions, religions, and cultures.
To encourage a positive appreciation of cultural
and religious diversity.
To cultivate
an informed empathy
with the suffering of all human beings,
even those
regarded as enemies.
We urgently need to make compassion a clear, luminous, and dynamic force in our polarized world,
rooted in a principled determination to transcend selfishness.
Compassion can break down political, dogmatic, ideological, and religious boundaries.
Born of our deep interdependence, compassion is essential for human relationships and to a fulfilled humanity.
It is the path to enlightenment and indispensable in the creation of a just economy and a peaceful global community.
So, lot to digest in that video, right? Lots of different things and approaches to compassion. And especially, one of the things that I feel like is very important, especially in this time in the US, is the weaponization of religion towards hatred. And that is something that as interfaith organizations and organizations that work in the grassroots level with different communities, we try to make sure to bring back the element of commonality through the golden rule, right? Treat us as you want to be treated. So that's a very, that's basically in a nutshell the Charter for Compassion and what we do. We have different programs that allows us to not only expand compassion outwardly from everyone, but also to increase our self-compassion, because we are strong believers that in order for us to practice compassion, we need to first have compassion to ourselves. We cannot be pouring into other cups when our cup is not full. And so self-compassion is a priority, and it's necessary for us to become more compassionate beings towards everything around us. And when I say everything, I don't mean just people, but I mean animals, the environment, the earth, and everything that involves our existence. So super important, but super motivating principle. So the Charter for Compassion now, after 10, 12 years of existence, we provide courses, we have meetings, we have coordination with different communities. And one of the programs that we have is the Compassionate Cities program. The Compassionate Cities program is basically, what we do in the Charter is giving guidelines and sort of like a pathway for people in different communities that maybe want to create a social impact big enough to create, more equity, more compassion in their own communities. And that could look very different in different communities. Maybe it's access to food, or it could be housing for the unhoused, or it could be more legislation towards single mothers that need better daycare in their own communities. Each community, as you know, has different needs. And so when we start thinking about the topic systemic violence, which is what we are trying to address here in this webinar, I would like to bring, maybe put a definition about systemic violence. So systemic violence refers to forms of harm and oppression that are embedded with social, economic, and political systems, institutions, or structures. It includes practices, policies, and norms that perpetuate inequality, discrimination, and marginalization of certain groups based on race, gender, class, sexuality, or other identities. Unlike direct violence, systemic violence is often less visible and more normalized, but it has widespread and lasting effects on individuals and communities by maintaining power imbalances and social injustice. And so really quickly, while I'm talking a little bit more about this, if you think about systemic violence with this definition, and you think about your own community, you can put it on the chat if you want to. What are some things that you observe in your own communities that are letting systemic violence prevail? This could be racism. This could be discrimination towards, people in the LGBTQ community. Could be the class separations or class wars, so income inequality, where you have very, 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 very crazy rich people and very, very poor people living in the same community. And all this different, and so you start thinking about your own communities and you realize that there are specific things that you as a community would like to address. Maybe you are part of a nonprofit organization that does something in your community. Maybe you're part of an institution, part of the government, part of the private sector, but you see that there's something that you could do in your community to do better. That's when the work of Compassionate Cities comes into work, or comes into sight, is when simple, regular humans in your own community get together and not only get together with their own organizational institutions, but work together with the city government or any sort of local government, and try to create legislation and living conditions of equity and equality for everyone. So everyone can benefit and everyone can be happy in this community. So I wanted to share another really quick video on Compassionate Cities. This was done 10 years ago, so it's a little bit old, but it's still relevant. And yeah, this discusses specifically Compassionate Cities and why we need more Compassionate Cities. So let me just put this up in the volume.
I live in the city of Pune. What I love about Pune is that it's a city that has heart, it's got music and theater and everything, and it makes it a very wholesome and complete city.
Rotterdam is the second city of the Netherlands. It's all about buildings and building.
Las Vegas is actually an extraordinary place to live. What most people don't appreciate is that behind those images, there is a very compassionate heart.
Sacramento is the capital of California. They have really promoting artists right now, and so a lot of new murals are going up, which is really making the energy of the city a lot more dynamic.
About 40% of the population of Pune city lives in slums. The second thing I would say is the issue of education, making education even better than what it is today. The challenges of any big growing city is what Pune is also facing.
We have a very poor educational outcome in terms of students graduating.
Literacy levels that are very high in some areas, very low in others. So ensuring that our education system is reaching everyone.
25% of children grow up in poverty in Rotterdam. In my opinion, that's a huge amount.
So Las Vegas has its dark side, as any city does, and among those areas is our children. So 1 out of 10 of our teenagers attempt suicide.
Well, I think one of the top issues is homelessness in the city. The poor, poverty, is an issue that exists in a major city like Dallas.
Homelessness and poverty, and I know that's true for so many cities, but poverty is huge. 1 in 4 or 5 children are hungry and in poverty, living in poverty, and it's just not acceptable.
Inequality is growing in Australia. That is an issue. Environmental issues are big ones as well.
In Australia, every 5 days a woman is killed, generally by their partner. And interestingly, every day 6 people kill themselves, 5 of them are men.
Everything the world needs is there. You have the technology, you've got the people, you've got the money, you have volunteers, you have everything. And yet, the world is not working. And I think the missing piece, the missing glue is compassion.
You can draw a line from Sandy Hook to Columbine to a number of different mass shootings here in America. And you can also ask the question, why? And the answer seems to be low emotional intelligence. And so compassion is really the curriculum for increasing emotional intelligence.
If humanity wants to save the world, I think the only path to reach that is the path of compassion. I'm so convinced about that.
We live in a time right now that's not very kind, but I think there's a lot of kind people out there, and we need to support and celebrate goodness and kindness. So we're just kind of changing the focus.
But it has to come from here, it has to come from you. It's personal responsibility, and you will feel uncomfortable. But that's okay. That is really okay. Feel uncomfortable.
I mean, really, I guess really what I want to say is the reason that we're compassionate is because our own healing is contingent on what we offer to other people.
And so what I think we need to develop is a transformation of a mindset from self-centeredness to one of other-centeredness, and begin to see others as I see myself.
It creates a ripple effect. You start with yourselves, your city, you advance to your state, your country, and before you know it, you've touched someone around the world.
I think it's imperative that we all join this movement and learn from each other and support each other and work towards a more wholesome world.
So it just gives you a little description of the evaluation of a 4-point plan. That's all that we can tell you at the Charter for Compassion. If you are feeling interested in learning more about the work of compassionate cities and you don't know where to start, I'm super glad that during this conversation we have Will from Compassion Las Vegas and then Anne from Compassion San Antonio, who are their own compassionate cities and creating their own different projects, addressing their specific issues and needs. And that is something super powerful that I feel so grateful that the Charter for Compassion provides, is sort of like the plan or like the way to start with this process. One of the things that in the video to me has impacted me a lot is the fact that it says a compassionate city is an uncomfortable city. These are cities that realize that nothing is, I mean, that it's not perfect, but there's room for growth. And sometimes applying the golden rule allows us to defeat that uncomfortable situation. A lot of times we might think that we have nothing in common with our neighbors or someone that is experiencing homelessness in our cities, when in reality we have a lot more commonality than we think so. But the only way that we can find that out is by talking, by communicating, by getting to know each other, applying the golden rule and realizing that I can see myself in somebody else and they can see themselves in me. And so, just before I pass it on to Will and everything, I wanted to, give you the link to our organization on the chat. It's charterforcompassion.org. And last but not least, I think this is a very exciting project that we have going on with the charter. One more share screen and that's it, I promise. We have a project called Map of Co-Creators. This is where you can put yourself in a map. This is all safe and secure with your information, but you put yourself on the map and then you show up. So this is Salt Lake City. I live, this is a little bit far away because I live like right here, but it shows right there because of my zip code. And so you can register for this map of co-creators right there. And you can put, your address, your phone. This information only shows to people that register. And then, you can put things that you are like areas of interest. So for example, for me, since I work in marketing for the Charter for Compassion, my priority is media and communications, but then my secondary areas are spirituality, relations and peace, justice and restoration, health, and there's all these different topics that you can do about. What's cool about this map, especially for communities that don't belong to the Compassionate Cities Network yet, is that you can see that other people, if they know about the map of creators, have put themselves in there. So for example, here I have Shelley Jensen, which I know as the same way as Susan Soleil because we worked in a project together prior to this. And we can see, Susan's interests are religions and peace and environment, food and water. And so maybe if we move out of Utah and Salt Lake, you can see Las Vegas has a ton of people, Southern California, Sacramento, Colorado, San Antonio right there where Anne is. And so you can see that you can find people in your different communities, connect. And when you click on these people that you might not know, you can see, oh, this person's also worried or has an interest on spirituality and religion. Maybe we can collaborate and do a project together in Salt Lake City. And, or we get together all these different peoples and we create more community. The steps are all yours. You can take the first step, but remember that the best way to do this is remembering always compassion forward and with the golden rule in mind. So with that, I pass my time to Will, and I'm happy to take questions at the end of the webinar or the meeting.
Thanks so much, Felipe. So yes, next we're going to hear from Will, who's a dedicated advocate and dynamic media personality committed to humanizing healthcare while advancing equity across all intersecting sectors. As the host of Compassionate Las Vegas, the podcast, and a Healthier Tomorrow radio program, Will promotes compassion and understanding while addressing crucial health and wellness topics. He serves as the Director of Community Health Nevada at Intermountain Health, leading initiatives that prioritize equity and improve health outcomes for Southern Nevada communities. Beyond this role, he runs a successful speaking and coaching business, empowering organizations through values-based leadership. Will's leadership in organizations like Compassionate Las Vegas's Jameson Fellowship, the Global Charter for Compassion, and the Nevada Minority Health and Equity Coalition underscores his commitment to building a healthier, more inclusive society.
Well, thank you for that introduction. And Felipe, you are always such an inspiration. I should have brought videos and all of that, and I want to be like you when I grow up. So, well, good day, everyone. It is such a privilege to be here today with such esteemed colleagues from the Charter of Compassion and Compassionate San Antonio, as we discuss a topic that's not only timely, but I think that it's essential. And that's a compassionate approach to systemic violence. This date, and I want to acknowledge that it is 9/11, it's significant not just for America, but for the world. I reflect on the tragedy that is as fresh in my mind today as when I came down from my dorm room and saw the news on TV over 2 decades ago now. Today's conversation is certainly a fitting way to honor those that we lost, and to give us tools we need to create a world where this never has to happen again. So I definitely want to just acknowledge the date that this event is taking place on. So again, my name is Will Rucker, and I do have the honor of leading Compassion at Las Vegas, where our primary focus is building networks of compassion through relationship building and trust. In a world that often feels divided and so disconnected, we believe that the simple act of connection can be revolutionary, especially when it comes to addressing violence. So, Felipe gave us a great overview of what systemic violence is. And I just want to add that in our context, it's not just the overt acts we see in headlines, it's also the subtle structural violence embedded in policies, institutions, and frankly, sometimes in our own inaction. In fact, inaction can be one of the most pervasive forms of violence. When we remain silent, indifferent, or disconnected, we allow harm to continue unchecked. But there's hope, and it's found in compassion. Today, I'd like to share how we in Las Vegas approach this work through building trust, fostering connection, and teaching compassion as a skill. Now, when we think of violence, we often picture physical harm or aggressive acts. But systemic violence is what shows up in the structures and institutions that shape our society. It shows up in healthcare, in education, in housing, in the justice system. It's the unequal access to resources. It's the policies that perpetuate injustice and the systems that leave people behind. What we strive to do in creating spaces where building relationships is possible is to directly reduce the impact of inaction. And we do that by creating networks where people can act together and create meaningful progress. Inaction occurs when we see harm happening, but choose not to intervene, not out of malice, but often because we simply feel powerless, disconnected, or indifferent, or we're simply unaware. Yet this inaction allows systems of violence to persist, whether it's inequitable policies, social isolation, or the widening gaps between communities. Now, our Surgeon General, Dr. Vivek Murthy, has a fantastic book that I highly, highly, highly recommend, and it's entitled Together. And in that book, he mentions that loneliness and weak social connections are associated with a reduction in lifespan, similar to that caused by smoking 15 cigarettes a day. I used to do tobacco cessation for the American Lung Association, and I know the impact that cigarettes have, and none of it is good. So, understanding that loneliness is as impactful as smoking 15 cigarettes a day should get everyone's attention. It's a powerful reminder that disconnection can be just as harmful as physical violence. Inaction, indifference, disconnection, all of these feed systemic violence. The Surgeon General also points out that service is a form of human connection that reminds us of our value and our purpose. When we build relationships, foster trust, and engage in our communities, we take a giant step towards dismantling harmful systems. Compassion is the antidote to systemic violence, and connection is at the heart of that solution. Connection is not just a nice to have, it's absolutely necessary for building a more just and peaceful world. Connection is more than just a feeling, it's a fundamental human need. It's one of the most powerful tools we have to address violence. Compassion at Las Vegas operates with this understanding at its core. We believe that by building strong relationships and teaching the skill of trust, we create the foundation for real and lasting change. Connection requires intention. It requires showing up, being present, and making the effort to better understand one another. When we foster relationships built on trust, we create spaces where people feel safe, valued, and heard. And it's in these spaces where violence, whether physical, emotional, or systemic, loses its power. I like to think of compassion as a skill because it's something we can learn, something we can practice, and something we can strengthen. In Las Vegas, we've seen firsthand how compassion can transform a community. By centering trust and connection, we not only prevent harm, but we cultivate resilience. We create networks where people feel supported and know that someone has their back. One story that comes to mind is from our Jameson Fellowship, which I'll talk about in a moment. And the fellowship, just to kind of get into it a little bit, it's our longest running program, and it brings together leaders from diverse sectors to cultivate compassion in their work. So, one moment during our fellowship workshop a few years back, where we were engaging in, yes, a trust building exercise, one of the participants, who was a healthcare leader, simply shared how difficult it had been for her to trust. And this was a result of constant burnout and challenges in her work. Through the fellowship, though, she found a space where she could reconnect with her own sense of purpose and compassion. And in that moment, surrounded by peers who supported her, she realized that trust isn't just given, it's built through understanding, through vulnerability, and through shared experience. In fact, trust is formed when we ask for help, not just when we offer help. So it's stories like these that remind me that compassion is not just a skill, it's also a bridge that brings people together. In spaces like the fellowship, we're cultivating leaders who carry forward this skill into their communities, and they create a ripple of trust and connection that combats systemic violence at its core. So, this is what it looks like to address violence through a compassionate lens. And at Compassionate Las Vegas, we partner with organizations that embody this approach. We're building a network of networks that reinforce and infuse compassion into every area of community. People often ask, well, what does Compassionate Las Vegas do? And this is not a great answer, but I'm going to give it anyway. We don't do anything. We are something. We are a network of networks that bring together programs like Dads in Schools, where fathers provide a compassionate presence in schools, which is proven to reduce violence. Or we partner with Green Our Planet, which connects students with nature and provides gardens for schools. And we partner with Battleborn Academy, which these students, and I'm not talking about, high schoolers, I mean like kindergartners and first graders, are engaging in restorative circles. And in these spaces, they learn to resolve conflicts and express their needs and build understanding. In fact, I'll give Battleborn as another example. In a circle, often the kids will come up and will ask the question, what do you need in this situation? You hurt someone on the playground and you're not feeling good about it. What do you need to make it better? Sometimes they'll say, I just need a hug or a high five, or I just wanted to say it. And it's amazing that these kids are resolving conflicts at a level that even in our highest level of politics isn't happening. So that's the magic of Compassionate Las Vegas. That's what we really are able to do well. That's who we are. And in Las Vegas, we believe that compassion is the foundation of a thriving community. And so we take intentional steps to not only be a compassionate community, but to recognize those who are embodying that spirit. So, in partnership with our city government, we host the Compassionate City Awards. And those awards honor individuals, organizations, and even initiatives that make an impact through kindness, empathy, and trust building. This event doesn't just celebrate compassion in action, it also reminds us that each of us has the capacity to contribute to a more just and caring society. The awards recognize those in the community working to assist those in the areas of health and wellness, education, housing, human trafficking, strengthening the family, sustainability, and restorative justice. So I'm truly proud to be part of a city that shines a light on the powerful role compassion plays in reducing violence and creating stronger communities. So I mentioned I'd share more about the Jameson Fellowship, and it is our most robust program that we directly impact. And it's simply an invitational opportunity that allows dynamic leaders to come together and build relationships. The carrot that we offer is, hey, you're going to learn leadership skills and you're going to have amazing workshops and have opportunities to attend events. But what we're really doing is just putting people in a place that they otherwise wouldn't find themselves and showing them how to build relationships. So we make a promise to all those that accept our invitation, and that promise is multifold. We promise connection. They get to network with diverse leaders and change makers who are making a difference. We promise skill development, and they do get access to workshops and seminars and professional skill development and things of that nature. We offer empowerment. We create a supportive community that fosters collaboration, it fosters innovation and collective action. And we promise that their impact is going to elevate. And how do we know we can make that promise? Because we know that when we come together, more happens. When we come together, that collective impact is always exponential. It's not just additive. So I'll close with saying this. As our community continues to mature, because Las Vegas is a young town, we're just barely 100 years old. We do recognize that we can't continue to do business in the same siloed fashion that we did to get us where we are today. We need to build the tissue of trust and connectivity between our organizations and within our organizations. So, as we extend the broad wings of our connectivity, we discover new and creative ways of addressing our community's needs. And as we deepen our trust, we enlarge our capacity for good work. We know that the problems we face can't be solved in isolation. The issue of education, it requires the assistance of nonprofits, as well as government and just everyday citizens coming together in order to address it. And this applies for law enforcement and for healthcare and you name it. So that's why the Jameson Fellowship exists. That's why we bring together these other programs and really elevate them. And we do know folks are busy doing important work. So we honor folks' time and we make everything that we do impactful. We ensure that what we provide is going to be translatable into multiple settings and that it actually works. So, as we've explored today, systemic violence isn't just what we see, it's also about what we allow. It's the structures that persist when we fail to act, it's the disconnection that happens when we fail to trust. But the solution is absolutely within our reach. It's in how we show up for one another, how we build trust, how we foster relationship. Compassion, hope, and love are our superpowers. And these energies never fail, they never run out. So I challenge each of you on the Zoom today to ask the question, how can I bring compassion into my daily life? Whether it's your workplace, your family, or your community, we all have the ability to make a difference. It starts with a conversation, a small gesture, or just being present. And in Las Vegas, we've seen firsthand how small actions add up. So I close every podcast with this quote, and I do invite you to tune into the podcast, visit compassion.vegas to learn more. But I close with this quote, and I'll share it with you today. You are not just a drop in the ocean. You are the entire ocean in a drop, and what you do matters. So live compassionately. So thanks so much for listening, and Eva, I'll turn it back to you.
Thank you so much, Will. So finally, we will hear from Anne, who is the faith liaison for the city of San Antonio, Texas, and the civic coordinator of Compassionate San Antonio. Her official role is to intentionally form collaborations between the faith community, government entities, nonprofit organizations, community groups, schools, and businesses, and anyone who is willing to work together in meeting the most vulnerable of human needs, and also serves on the board for the International Charter for Compassion. So Anna, I will turn it over to you.
Well, I'm really busy right now. No, I'm not, but I have been really busy in the chat. So, and I think that one, I want to thank both Felipe and Will. Ditto to all of that. And we couldn't have planned this better, I don't think, in terms of laying out what the charter does and how that moves. And then specifically to go into a city like Las Vegas and how that moves there. And I could equally spend time talking about San Antonio and how it moves here. But I think, especially with this, the kind of the conversation that's happening in chat, I think what I'd like to do is spend just a little bit of time breaking it down so that we can kind of get our hands on it, maybe a little bit more. So, in other words, I think one of the key words in our conversation today is systemic. Systemic violence. If you've ever been through some compassion education And if you haven't, I highly recommend it, and we can point you to places, right? But all of the curriculums, Stanford has it, and I mean, there's a bunch of them, right? And the charter has them, and Compassionate USA. Anyway, all of the compassion education always cover 3 areas, and this is important. Self-compassion, so offering that antidote into your own life. Compassion with others, how we interact with others, and then within systems. How do we look at systems? And both of the guys have already addressed this, but how do we look into systems to see where compassion or is absent or violence is occurring, and how we can possibly tweak that system to become more compassionate? One of the important things to remember is that everything is a system, and we're all a part of it, and we all contribute to it. Especially, as Felipe said, if we do nothing, we have just contributed to the violence. I know it sounds like, what? And this isn't a philosophy class, but I have found the most difficult system for me to work on is this one. I am a system. And so I think if we start thinking more like that, we'll also start to see how compassion can be interjected into systemic violence, and how simple tweaks, in fact, I look for the simple tweak, the one simple shift that could potentially leverage an entire huge system. Huge systems like healthcare, what's happening in the Holy Land, what happens in our educational system or our policing systems, or we all know the systems, right? We could become very overwhelmed because of the largeness of it. But what can also happen, it can be debilitating. It can be so large that we get paralyzed and we do nothing. And so again, we're still contributing when we do nothing. So the beauty of compassion and what we have learned recently, and when I say recently, like the last decade or so, there's a lot of major research out there in terms of compassion being a part of the human DNA itself. Man, that gives me some hope, not just for myself, but for other people when I'm having difficulty seeing in them, right, that there's compassion there. And I remember it's in the human DNA. And compassion skills are not soft. I don't know where we ever got that feeling. I wouldn't say they're necessarily hard, but they are muscles and they are real. I like to, in San Antonio, talk about the Spurs. So when a basketball team practices, which in a professional team, that's pretty much all they do. They do more practicing than they do playing at games. And why? Because they are exercising their skills. They shoot. I still can't figure out why every free throw isn't made. I don't get it, but there's a human factor there. But they practice for the moment that when they're in the game, they don't have to think about the play or the skill. They have been exercising those skills repeatedly, and that's how our neural pathways are strengthened in terms of compassion, by repeating the skill sets of awareness, the skill set of how to have our feet firmly on the ground and that we're breathing and we stay centered. We do those things for the moments when things are intense. And so I'm going to break it down even further into a system. So I don't know about you, but I am not a fan of going to the doctor's office. And in fact, what might actually be happening to me physically and while I'm going there, it seems to almost be secondary to me, to my feelings of how it's going to be when I go into the waiting area and how I'm going to be treated by staff and people. And I don't know about you, but I believe time is one of our most valuable gifts in this world. And it's valuable to me. I recognize the value of it to a doctor, but I can sit there for 2 hours and I can get the feeling that no one really respects that value in my own life. There are a lot of things that have happened in terms of doctor's office. There's never been a drag down fight or whatever, but it's a system, right? And I think it's kind of become part of that culture, that it's just okay to have people wait and have us fill out the same paperwork a gazillion times. There are all these things. Until a couple weeks ago, I went into a doctor's office. I thought I had died and gone to heaven. And I thought, if this could happen here, right? I literally put my foot over the threshold, and the woman who was immediately to my left said, "Hi, Anne," and I had never met her before. And it went on from there. I was addressed by my name. I was told every next step. I was initially told that my appointment was going to be 3 hours, and I realized later they did that so that when I got out in 45 minutes, I was celebratory and joyful because it wasn't 3 hours, right? That's a system. And we can tweak those systems, and what we do makes a difference on what happens in the larger system. And I'm really into that. We call it in San Antonio, how we can, what do we call it? How we can leverage the system on the largest scale possible by the smallest of moves. And usually in a large system, the smallest of moves is right here. So when I go into conversation and a solution making session on systemic violence or unhealthy system, which violates people's lives, right? I'm always asked the question, but how can I move differently in this picture? What can I do differently? And so with that kind of education and training, there's self, there's others, and then there's systems. And so what happens on the micro will eventually ripple, as we've heard about the ripples, to the macro. And so how I move, think about another situation where you might be with 3 or 4 people, and somebody in the 3 or 4 people kind of subtly, very subtly, put someone down in the group even, or maybe somebody outside of that little group, right? And you know it, and the others know it. It's so subtle, right? So subtle. But do we say anything? That's the one thing that I could do differently in that kind of situation. And I need to practice my skills, my compassion skills, to be strong when I get to that moment and I'm ready for it, to stand for that other. In San Antonio, the other thing that we have done is a lot of what we call translating. A real simple example of translating would be the golden rule. We have translated and utilized it. We still use the term golden rule, and it's the most predominant dominator in all the world religions. It's found there. But we've translated it to the ethic of reciprocity. We found that in some training and we've used it. But what we find that's so helpful with it is that when we start to engage other people in society and maybe in civic leadership, and we start talking about the golden rule in a dominant culture of separation of church and state, there can be a subtle shift in somebody's mind that this is a faith thing. And it is. And it doesn't have to be, right? But when we started to utilize ethic of reciprocity, everybody always goes, what's that? That's always the next, what's that? Well, it's like, I'm going to treat other people the way I want to be treated. You've probably heard that as the golden rule. Or equally, maybe we treat others the way we don't want to be treated. We don't do that either. That has helped us by leaps and bounds, that there's not this kind of block in, I don't know, it's just very subtle. But we even translate then the golden rule over and over again to neighbor as we wish to be neighbored ourselves, and to not neighbor in ways we don't wish to be neighbored. To trust, to respect, to listen, to walk. I mean, you can put almost any verb in there and you can make it work. And we do a lot of that, to listen as we wish to be heard. So I'm going to stop because I see that it's 6 to the hour. And I will add one thing. We have taken the ethic of reciprocity so far into our civic leadership that our mayor and entire council are trained in it. And they use the golden rule when they make policies. Every time. That's when you start to see the ripple effect, right? Or one major one. So I will quit now. It's still 6 towards the hour.
Thank you, Anne. Thank you so much to all three of our presenters. So we have about 5 minutes left, so I want to open it up if anybody would like to ask a question. Vasu?
Thank you so much, Geneva, Felipe, Reverend Will, and it's wonderful to see the interconnection of compassion in all diversity of religions. And from Buddhism, we always reaffirm our commitment for compassion. So I wonder, what do you think we can do to help connecting the diversity of religions on this common goal that we have on compassion? Thank you.
Was that question for me? Did I hear an Anne in there? Or was it for everybody? One, it's a beautiful, it's a beautiful question. And in fact, again, back to San Antonio, because that's the experience I know best, we did start the compassion movement within our interfaith community. And we utilized the charter that was written by global faith leaders, which I think is one of the most important documents. But we utilized that to bring us together as a faith community across our diversity. And we had people sign it. We would read it wherever we went. And we would talk about it. We had full conversations just around the charter. What does that mean? I'm telling you the line that every gathering I go to, that people go, what? And they're struck by the line about any religion that breeds, right, hate, animosity is illegitimate. I can't tell you how many people have come to me and said, finally, it's been said out loud. And that's across faith traditions, right, and religions. And so we realize our commonality in the best gold of us, right? It's really that rule, that golden rule, that ethic that has really united our faith community here.
And this is Maggie. I'll say that as when I went to learn skills for compassion, I went to Buddhism, because Buddhism systemically can teach through a variety of practices compassion, and it's some of the best skill training I've gotten. So I have so much appreciation for Buddhism for thousands of years bringing that in.
Go ahead, Vasu.
Thank you, and thank you, Geneva. I will also would like to introduce to my friend Venerable Tridao. Yes, he have a great expertise working with the Theravada tradition in Buddhism.
Hello to all of you. Thank you so much for reminding everyone here of compassion, which is something that the Buddha taught 2,567 years ago. In seeing suffering in ourselves, we see suffering in other people. Compassion arises out of deep understanding for other people, and that means we have to study them. Particularly, thank you, Anne, for bringing up the systemic issues that we have now from bottom up and from the top down, from corporations to police departments to groups. A lot of work to be done, but what a beautiful movement, spreading the fire of compassion. And hopefully everyone can adopt the different faiths and philosophies of different religions and applying that in order to extinguish the fire of hate and injustice and discrimination and prejudice that is out there. So thank you all for contributing today. I learned so much.
Thank you so much. Felipe, did you have anything to add? I think that that Will had to step off for another meeting.
Yeah, we'll have to leave already. Well, I mean, so this is like my little home office, right? But one of the things I have here, and I don't know if you've seen this poster before, is the Golden Rule poster. And it gives you the Golden Rule versions in different religions. So you have Islam, Buddhism, Taoism, Sikhism, Christianity, and there's another one that's like the Green Rule. Again, Golden Rule, but focused on the environment. And I think that's a great way to begin any sort of conversation in the interfaith spaces, and even in non-interfaith spaces, bringing yourself to a common ground with somebody else. And most of the times when you're talking to people that believe in a specific religion or spiritual practice, the Golden Rule becomes an easy way to connect, bring commonality, sort of like a basic ground, and then build from there.
Thank you. So we are on the hour now. Were there any final questions before we close? Feel free to raise your hand if you have a question or comments.
I think Reverend Ewell has something here.
I think there might be something in the chat regarding how to access some of them. I think that might be Compassionate Las Vegas. Will this be revived? Yes. So this has been live streamed and it is available right now on the Interfaith Center at Miami University's YouTube channel and Facebook page. And here is a link to the live stream. So feel free to share with anyone you think would find the presentation valuable. If there are no other questions, I open to Anne or Felipe if you have any final thoughts or comments that you would like to leave our listeners with.
If you would like to get more involved in compassionate cities, how to address systemic violence through compassion, reach out to us, charterforcompassion.org. I put my email, Felipe at charterforcompassion.org, and as well as social media and anything we can be reached out in all the possible ways. And again, it all begins with self-compassion. You need to fill your cup and understand that in order for you to fill all these cups, you need to fill yours first. And I don't know if you would like to add anything else.
What I'd like to add is that humans not only survive, they thrive when they have purpose. And when they know they're not alone and they're part of something bigger. So that's exactly what we've described today. And so the takeaway for me is you're not alone. I'm not alone. And I don't know about you, but that does more than keep me going. It provides energy and I think that's one of the greatest things that the Charter has done, is to help us see ourselves, and I mean right here, right now, as part of something bigger globally, and how we can actually access that and connect and know that we indeed are leveraging the system on the largest scale possible by our own small human moves every day. So I'm just grateful. I feel really great. I can't wait to jump into the work I was doing before and I was running out of energy for, and now I'm ready to roll up my sleeves again. So thank you.
Great, thank you. And I actually did just receive a message from Reverend Batsu that he had a question. Reverend Batsu,
Yes, I have a question, and also I appreciate all the efforts which have, you did that. It's a very important topic of today. But when we are saying about the compassion, in my opinion, there should be everyone should have a calling. Calling. If I have a calling with the heart, then it will be compassion. And but I know that in the 9/11, that was a calling for me that I should come into faith. So it's a great. In 2007, I was able to visit that 9/11 center, the Trade Center. That was a morning on there. That was a very bad. One thing more, it was a reflection. That when there is a hunger, when there is not a good spirit, no education in certain areas. So what that United Nations and the big countries doing for the grassroots level? In grassroots level, there are problems, not on the high levels. There are hunger, there is poverty, there is uneducation, and they are not so privileged. Either United Nations is seeing these issues in the world, either they will just like killing, and with the hunger they will die, and with the diseases, with everything. We have to focus with that grassroots. Although statistics shows that they are underprivileged, but what should we do, and what we should have a compassion, and what should we have a calling to? They should come out from these problems. Thank you so much. Maybe multiple questions.
Well, my first response to that, and I know we're 5 minutes after, but Compassion at San Antonio began grassroots, and we intentionally stayed grassroots, and it's still grassroots. But we stayed grassroots for 7 years before even approaching like civic leadership and that type of thing. And we started in a book read. And the book read was the 12 Steps to a Compassionate Life. It's like in 75 different languages.
Wow.
By Karen Armstrong.
Very good.
And we read it together, and it formed us into community, and it organically informed us on how to move forward without that being in the pages at all. And recently I've been working with somebody in Haiti, and we met at a conference, and he is taking the compassionate community steps grassroots, and there's a spot that can use that, right? And he's working it, and he's got a team that's growing, and they're all learning compassion together. So that's just one idea. Read a book together with a couple other people and see where that leads you.
And I think just to quickly add to what you're saying, Anne, all this movements, all the things that we see nowadays as big issues began as grassroots concerns. Like it's something that we see in our community, and maybe in San Antonio we see it as well. Maybe we see it in another city, and then you realize that all these little grassroots movements become not just grassroots, become bigger because more people become aware of it, more people are concerned about things, and so in my opinion, I think that the purpose of a grassroots movement in general is to activate it in the local capacity to make it bigger and more of an issue that all of us can address and all of us can work on. But it begins because we are seeing it personally in our own experience, in our own communities. But then we see that just like this community, another community is probably experiencing something similar, and that's where the movement gets bigger.
Yes.
Thank you both, and thank you for the question, Reverend Balti. I believe, Vasu, you had your hand up. Did you still have a comment?
Thank you so much, Geneva. It's Bernard Tridao.
Sorry, I just wanted to contribute about the meditation aspect of it. Is that, like Anne said, it's a muscle, and rarely can a human cognitively understand and quickly put compassion into practice without the clinical benefits of meditation, which is loving kindness, metta meditation. I grew up a very angry, volatile young man. A monk is one who finds his fault and start fixing them. That's renunciation for monks. That's what I have been doing. And so I have found meditation to be extremely effective as a young angry man. At age 14, I started practicing meditation. So 23 years later, here I am. And, you got to win the battle against oneself in order to inspire other people out there in the world. It starts with you. Thank you for having me again.
I'm right there with you. It's one of the muscles.
Thank you all so much. Well, I do want to be mindful of everyone's time, but I just wanted to make sure everyone had a chance to give their final comments. So again, thank you to Anne and Felipe and to Will, and to all of you for being here with us today. And I will be happy to send out any resources that all of you have from the Charter for Compassion and the different work that you're doing to everyone who registered for the program today. So along with the recording, so look for a follow-up email from me as well. But thank you all for your time, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day or your evening, wherever you are in the world.
Thank you. Bye.